Yo, what's up, guys? An inexplicable loss tonight by the Toronto Raptors, blowing an 18-point lead, losing to the Minnesota Timberwolves 128-126, guys. A really frustrating game tonight for the Raptors. After playing a solid first half, an okay third quarter, the Raptors once again have a fourth quarter collapse for the third time in 4 bloody games. I don't know what the hell goes on through some of these players' heads in that fourth quarter. I understand, that the Raptors are a young team. You got to go through some growing pains. And obviously, we don't have a big, but my God, some of the mistakes they were making tonight, especially in that fourth quarter, were just inexcusable in this game today. You got Jamal Shead and RJ Barrett, turning the ball over, unforced turnovers tonight, especially in that fourth quarter, 2 each by the both of them. And I don't even understand why guys like Jamal Shead and RJ Barrett are bringing up the basketball when you have guys like Scotty Barnes, who's an all-star this year, and you got Brandon Ingram as well, who should have been an all-star this year, and you got a guy in Emmanuel Quickly who's making $30 million a year plus. 3 other guys that should have been bringing up the ball, or you got to have your leaders like Scotty and Brandon Ingram saying, give me the basketball, I'm going to be running the play, whatever. You got to do something. You got to take control of the game here. You could see it in this game tonight, guys, that it was slowly getting away from the Raptors near the end of the third, the beginning of the fourth. You could see it. Now, in the first half, the Raptors were bloody incredible in the first half. The perimeter defense was fantastic. They were moving the ball on offense, getting points in the paint. They were shooting the basketball incredibly well, making 3-pointers. Everything was going right for them in the first half. You had 5 guys in bloody double figures at halftime. You had Murray Boyles, who had a solid first half with 11 points. RJ, who had 11 at halftime. You had Malmo, who had 11 at halftime. Quickly had 11 at halftime. And Scotty had 10, 6, and 6. And B.I. only had 7. But still, they were playing really well, shooting the ball with great efficiency. Like Scotty was 4 for 5. Murray Boyles was 5 of 8. Quickly was 4 of 7. RJ was 4 of 10. Malmo was 4 of 6. They were shooting the ball really, really well in that first half, shooting 57% from the field, 53% for 3, 9 to 17 from the land beyond. Honestly, guys, they were 100% from the free throw line, doing a really good job neutralizing Minnesota in that first half. Edwards had 9 points at halftime. The only guys that were really causing problems in that first half was Bones Highland, who had 13, shooting really well from behind the arc. He was 5 of 7 from the field. Honestly, Naz Reid only had 3 points in the first half. Randall had 10. McDaniels had 8. And Gobert had 7 and 4 rebounds. DiVincenzo had 9. So the Raptors did a great job neutralizing the Timberwolves from their 3-point shooting, getting points in the paint. They were doing a great job, the Raptors, getting in transition, moving the ball up the floor when they were able to get a stop. Everything was going in the direction. Raptors had 13 fast break points at the half. They had 6 points on Minnesota's 3 turnovers, so they were doing really well at that. You had 29 rebounds. You're out rebounding. The Timberwolves had more assists. They were doing a really good job. 32 points in the paint compared to Minnesota's 20 in the first half. And then in the second half, Minnesota made some adjustments. Obviously, they're a very good team. Back-to-back Western Conference final appearances. You knew that Chris Finch was going to go in there at halftime and make some adjustments. Minnesota's got some great players on the team. Obviously, you got a superstar like Anthony Edwards. What the Raptors were doing a great job in the first half shutting down. But then in the second half, Minnesota started playing better offensively, started moving the ball better, and then defense, they really locked it down, the Timberwolves, making it difficult for the Raptors, especially in that fourth quarter, guys. Now, in the third quarter, Raptors did respond a lot after Minnesota started making some shots. The Raptors had a response for the Timberwolves. But then in the fourth, it was a completely different animal, if you guys ask me. Minnesota won the second half. They outscored the Raptors 35-32 in the third and then 34-22 in the fourth. These are unacceptable things that are happening for the Raptors as of late. You had the collapse against the Knicks, the collapse against the Magic. Now you have the collapse tonight. Come on, man. It's just not good enough by the Raptors. Your superstars have to take control of the game. Like we saw Anthony Edwards take control of the game tonight. 13 points in the fourth quarter. Like I said, 9 in the first half for Ant. He finishes with 30 tonight, guys. 21 points in the second half. And like I said, 13 in the fourth. When the best players want to perform, they perform in the biggest moments of the game, and that is in the fourth quarter. And Anthony Edwards said, "Give me the basketball. I'm about to take us home for a win." And that's what I expect Scottie Barnes and Brandon Ingram to be doing. Do not let guys like Jamal Shead, RJ Barrett have the ball in crucial moments of the game. You guys need to be the ones saying, "I want the basketball." And I'm not saying go and defy Darko Rajakovic, but you got to be the one to say, "I'm the one the play's going to run through." And there were too many times tonight where that wasn't happening. And then Coach Darko as well. Why in Christ's name are you sitting Scottie and Brandon Ingram together? You got to stop doing that. If you want to sit them separately. Teams go on runs, like 10-0 runs, 8-0 runs, when those two are not on the floor. Scottie had made a massive difference when he was on the floor. They were like a plus 15 when Scottie wasn't on the floor, and like a minus 12 in the fourth quarter before Scottie entered the game. Like, those are things that I blame the coach for. But then you also have to blame the players for missing open shots, turning the ball over. They panicked too many times. Jamal said at the end there, he panicked when he turned that ball over where he was light-footed there and he tried to pass it off, and he turned it over. Like, those things cannot be bloody happening in the second half and in a game in general. You have to close out these type of games. These are games that you're going to look back on and say to yourselves, you know what, that game there, they should have won. This game there, they should have won. And listen, you got Cleveland and Philadelphia right up your ass. Cleveland's right there after acquiring James Harden for Garland yesterday. Philly's starting to turn it around a little bit. So teams are making moves. The Knicks are playing great ball again. Boston's playing great. Detroit, who you got to play at the end of the homestand, are obviously at top of the East. Other teams are making deals. We saw the Wizards acquire Trae Young not that long ago and acquire Anthony Davis today. And don't worry, I'm going to get involved. I'm going to talk about more about what the Raptors did today regarding Chris Paul. But a couple more points regarding this game today, guys. The Raptors finished off the game shooting well, 53% from the field. But three-point line, 48% as well. But you missed some open shots. Like Mamu missed a key three-pointer wide open. Got to make that. Coach Darko has said it in the past. It's a make-or-miss league. Yes, I get it. But at the end of the day, you made too many mistakes on defense. You missed too many shots on offense. You turned the ball over too many times. You turned the ball over 7 times in the fourth, single-handedly. In the fourth alone, you turned the ball over 7 bloody times. Out of 13 turnovers in this ballgame, 7 times in the fourth. It's inexcusable, man, against great teams like the Timberwolves, who have great players like Anthony Edwards. They will find a way to bloody torture you, and Edwards wasn't even the only one torturing the Raptors in this game. Like, you got Bones Highland, who had 20 points off the bench, who has not played much this year for the Timberwolves, and then you have another guy in Naz Reid who had 17. They were the only 2 guys who came off the bench today for the Timberwolves. Nobody else came off the bench except for Clark for 6 minutes and Juzang for 2. Those 2 combined, Reid and Highland combined for 37 points. That's what happens when you get production from your bench compared to the Raptors, where you get guys like Grady Dick, Jamal Shead, and Jacoby Walter combining for a total of 16 points. And Mamu with 14, okay? So 26 points there, and they had 27. But that's a one-off, okay? The Raptors have had many games where their bench isn't productive enough, and tonight we saw Grady, Jamal, Jacoby not productive tonight on offense enough for the Raptors to get this win. Like, you had Edwards, who finishes the game off with 30, like I mentioned. Then you have Highland and Reid with 20 and 17. DiVincenzo had 15. Gobert had 10 and 12. McDaniels had 19. Randall had 17. So all those guys, the 7 guys they played, all had double figures tonight. They were the better team tonight. In the second half, the Timberwolves locked it down defensively, gave the Raptors trouble. Raptors weren't able to move the ball on the fast break after because Minnesota was getting such great stops on defense. They were the ones pushing on the fast break. They were playing the Raptors game against the Raptors tonight, guys. Minnesota had 20 fast break points. Remember what I said? We had 13 in the first half, only having 4 in the second half. So Minnesota made it a point of emphasis to start defending tighter, and then they push on the fast break, and then they could set their defense. And then the Raptors had trouble. When it's 5 against 5 and there's no fast breaks, the Raptors have difficulty setting up their offense and finding guys getting open on their sides. 20 fast break points for the Timberwolves tonight, guys. They had 15 points off the Raptors turnovers tonight. Majority of that came in the fourth quarter tonight. Not good enough for the Raptors. 52 points in the paint, end up being even after the Raptors had a 12-point advantage on the Timberwolves in the first half, guys. Second chance points, 20-18, 13 offensive rebounds for the Minnesota Timberwolves. And listen, guys, I understand the Minnesota Timberwolves. You got big guys like Reed and Gobert and Randall. I understand that. But man, oh man, the Raptors are really hurting without Jakob Poeltl in the lineup. Mamu and Murray Boyles have done a good job holding the fort down for Jakob Poeltl. But when you play 7-footers that can dominate in the paint, and Gobert didn't even dominate that much in the paint. These guys here, it's not their game. They're forced and they're pressured to play a different style of game because of the missing piece in Jakob Poeltl in the middle of the floor there, guys. And tomorrow, we got ourselves the NBA trade deadline tomorrow. There is a lot of chatter going on. Sabonis with the draft picks. Raptors have never given up multiple first-round draft picks. Totally understandable why Bobby Webster doesn't want to do that. Obviously, we heard the news today that they traded Ochai Agbaji to the Brooklyn Nets and a second-round draft pick for Chris Paul. But the Raptors have already told Chris Paul, we don't even need you to show up, bro. We're either going to waive you or trade you. And now I think Chris Paul, I have nothing against Chris Paul. He's a Hall of Famer, of course. One of the greatest point guards to ever play in the NBA. But you already have a veteran guy like Garrett Temple here. I highly doubt the Raptors would bring in Chris Paul to be a veteran guy, a role model for these younger guys after you have a guy like Garrett Temple. It's clearly evident that the Raptors don't want to keep Chris Paul. They've already stated that. We saw Shams Charania say it today that they're going to either waive or trade the guy. So it's unfortunate that we won't see Chris Paul in a Raptors jersey. That would be pretty cool. Something I thought I would never see in my lifetime. But it seems like the Raptors only made that trade due to luxury reasons. Of course, the Raptors are under the luxury tax now with this trade for Chris Paul. Now, obviously, Bobby Webster gets criticized a lot. Now, with the Ochai trade happening, you had traded Otto Porter Jr. for Olenek and Ochai. You had to trade a first-round draft pick, and then after now, you got to trade a second-round draft pick to get rid of Ochai. I understand, guys, there's a lot of frustration in regarding that move that they had to make with Otto Porter Jr. and everything else with Olenek and Ochai, so very understandable regarding that. But now, Bobby Webster, he's got a lot of decisions to make in the next 24 hours with the deadline coming up tomorrow, guys. I've been hearing one quote that a lot of Raptor fans have been saying about Bobby Webster on Twitter/X. Are you a man, Bobby Webster, or are you a mouse? Go out there and make a bloody trade to either get this team a big or a bloody shooter in here. Because after what we saw tonight, especially by R.J. Barrett, who had a really, really difficult night tonight. R.J. Barrett only had 12 points tonight, guys. 13 points tonight. 4 of 12 shooting, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, and those 2 costly turnovers on the floor. You could clearly tell R.J. was not himself tonight. RJ has done some good things for this team in the past, but clearly the deadline is weighing on him. He clearly does not want to leave home. Toronto's his home. I get that, but there's been a lot of chatter about him. It clearly affected him tonight, it seems like. It just was not a good performance by him, and tonight's game will not help him staying in Toronto if he wants to stick around post-deadline, because that was not good enough tonight by RJ Barrett. So Bobby Webster has 1 day left to improve this basketball team, or else this ball club here better pray to God Jakob Poeltl's back heals up very quickly, because if it doesn't, this team here could be finding themselves in a play-in position extremely quickly, because like I mentioned, Cleveland's coming, Philly's coming. Listen, Orlando's turning a little bit of a corner now. Charlotte's getting hot now as of late. Even though they traded Colin Sexton today, they are starting to play good ball, the Hornets. I'm starting to get a little bit concerned with the collapses with this team, the mental attitude of this team, the stress this team is putting on themselves because they don't have a big forcing things. It's really starting to annoy me now with this Raptors team, guys, because it has not been good enough the last 3 to 4 games. You almost blew the game against the Jazz. Luckily Utah's not that good, but you almost blew that game as well. But tonight's game was another worrying sign, an inexcusable performance tonight by the Raptors in that fourth quarter. Another fourth quarter collapse, a double-digit lead blown to bits like that. I need to see Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram take control of games like I saw Anthony Edwards do tonight. Even though Scotty had 22, 10, and 8, B.I. had 25 and 6 and 4. We need those guys in closeout moments to finish off the game for the Raptors, especially when they blew the lead. They got to be the one to calm the waters down and say, okay, guys, we're going to take control of this game and find a way to win this game. But we just did not see that tonight. Now, congrats to Coach Darko, going to be coach of the coach world at the All-Star break. That's great and everything else, but he needs to worry about what this team is going to do post-trade deadline, because right now, a little bit of worrying signs the last 3 or 4 games, blowing the leads they've had in the fourth quarter. You know, they got 13 3-pointers tonight, I'm pretty sure the Raptors. Like 15 3-pointers, actually. 15 threes tonight, guys. You know, that's more than enough to win a ball game. We've seen the Raptors win games by not even making 10 bloody threes. You know, not even making 6 or 7. So, we need to see a better, improved team after this trade deadline happens tomorrow. Things are going to be very interesting to see what happens tomorrow, guys, with the trade deadline. I'll be making a video if the Raptors do anything big or if they don't do anything at all. Bobby Webster, are you a man or a mouse? We will find out tomorrow, guys. But I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions about this game tonight, guys. So click like if you like this video. Subscribe if you guys want to see more content. Go Raptors, go as always, guys. We'll see you guys on the next episode of Raptors Unfiltered. Ciao, guys.